I first started noticing it at my cousin's wedding. Emily looked so beautiful that day. She wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a simple blue dress she'd found on sale a month earlier, but to me, she was breathtaking. I was proud to have her by my side, but the looks people gave us were different. Not admiration. Not happiness for me. Just judgment. It was in the way they stared a second too long, in the quiet murmurs when she turned her back. I caught my uncle giving me this poor guy expression, like he knew something I didn't. And then, right after the ceremony, I heard it. My cousin, someone I practically grew up with, leaned over to his wife and said, "She's just with him for the money. Give it a year, maybe 2, and she'll be gone." I froze. I wanted to confront him, to call him out, but my voice wouldn't come. Maybe I was afraid of causing a scene, or maybe I just didn't want Emily to hear it. She was across the room, smiling at the bride, completely unaware of the poison dripping from my own family's mouths. The rest of the night felt like a blur. I laughed when I needed to, danced when the music played, but inside I was boiling. On the drive home, I kept stealing glances at Emily. She was humming along to the radio, her hand resting gently on mine, her wedding band catching the glow from the streetlights. When we got home, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. That maybe the drinks and the noise had messed with my head. But then, as she slipped off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed, I saw it in her eyes. That quiet sadness she tried to hide. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "They don't like me, do they?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Ignore them. They don't know you like I do." But her voice cracked when she said, "I didn't marry you for what you have. I married you for you." I pulled her close and kissed her forehead, swearing to myself that none of this mattered. That love was stronger than gossip. But deep down, I felt this gnawing worry. Because once whispers start, they rarely stop. And sure enough, they didn't. It started small. Little jokes at family dinners. Offhand comments about how well Emily had landed or how lucky she must feel. Then came the more obvious digs, someone joking that she better keep me happy or I might trade her in for a newer model, as if our marriage was some kind of business deal. Every time, I tried to laugh it off. To brush it aside like it didn't bother me. But Emily, she started to retreat. She'd smile less. She'd stay quieter during gatherings. And when we got home, I'd sometimes find her sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at nothing. One night, I walked in and saw tears streaming down her face. She didn't even try to hide them. "What did I do to them?" she whispered. "Why don't they like me?" I didn't have an answer. I wanted to tell her that it was just jealousy, that people didn't understand us, but the words felt hollow. Because the truth was, I didn't understand it either. Emily had been nothing but kind to everyone, offering to help, bringing thoughtful gifts, going out of her way to make people comfortable. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. And maybe that's what hurt the most, watching the woman I loved shrink under the weight of other people's assumptions. Back then, I thought the whispers would fade. That if we just kept living our lives, they'd move on to the next piece of gossip. But looking back now, I can see how naive that was. Those whispers were just the beginning. They were planting seeds that would grow into something far uglier, something that would nearly destroy us before the truth finally came out. But that night, sitting there with Emily's head on my shoulder and her tears soaking my shirt, all I could think about was how unfair it was. How love, real, honest love, could be so easily twisted into something ugly by people who barely even knew her. And I made a silent promise to myself, whatever came next, I'd protect her. Even if it meant standing against everyone I thought I could trust. It didn't take long for the whispers to turn into full-blown rumors. What had started as quiet comments at family events became something louder, bolder, almost like people thought they had the right to judge us out loud. At Sunday dinners, my aunts would make these little digs, pretending they were just jokes. "Emily, you must be thrilled," one of them said once, landing a man with a steady job and a house. "Not every girl's that lucky." She said it with a smile, but her eyes had that sharp edge that made it clear what she really meant. I wanted to say something, to defend my wife, but Emily just smiled politely and thanked her. She always tried to take the high road. She'd change the subject, pour more coffee, or compliment someone's outfit just to keep the peace. But at night, when it was just the two of us, I could feel the shift. She'd be quieter, distant even, like the words had carved a hole inside her that she couldn't patch up. Sometimes I'd find her scrolling through job listings late at night, and when I asked why, she'd say, maybe if I was working, they'd stop saying things about me. That broke me. I told her over and over, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're my wife. That's enough. But I could tell she didn't believe it. Not because she doubted my love, but because she was starting to believe the lie everyone else kept repeating. The rumors started spreading beyond family, too. Friends I'd known for years began making comments. At a barbecue, one of my buddies nudged me and said, "Careful, man. Women like that don't stick around once the money runs dry." He laughed like it was a harmless joke, but I saw Emily's face when she heard it. She went quiet for the rest of the afternoon, sitting alone on the porch swing until I finally convinced her to leave. I tried to ignore it, but the thing about lies is that they grow when you let them. The more people talked, the more they convinced themselves that they were right. And every time I stayed silent, it felt like I was agreeing with them. One night, after another long day where someone made a sly comment, I came home to find Emily sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, tears running down her cheeks. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Why do they hate me?" she whispered. "I've done everything I can to be kind. I've cooked for them, helped them, smiled when they insult me. And it's still not enough. What did I do to make them hate me?" I didn't know what to say. I stood there, feeling helpless, watching the woman I loved question her worth because of people who didn't even know her heart. I promised her, right there, that I'd do something. That I wouldn't let this keep happening. But I didn't know how to fight whispers. You can't reason with lies when people don't want to hear the truth. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. It was Thanksgiving, and my entire family was there. Emily spent the whole morning cooking her famous sweet potato casserole, the one my mom loved, trying to make a good impression. She even wore the sweater my sister had given her last Christmas, just to show she cared. Everything was fine until dessert. We were all sitting around the table when one of my cousins, drunk and loud, leaned back in his chair and said, "Hey, man, how much of your dad's money do you think she's gonna take when she leaves you?" The room went dead silent. Emily's hands froze. She didn't say a word. She just excused herself from the table and walked out to the car. I sat there for a second, stunned, before standing up and following her. She was sitting in the passenger seat, gripping the steering wheel even though the car wasn't on, her whole body shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I love you, but I can't keep walking into rooms where people think I'm a joke. Where they look at me like I'm trash. I'm not strong enough for this, and I don't know how much more I can take." Hearing those words felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under me. I wanted to scream, to tell her none of it mattered, that we'd get through it. But the truth was, I didn't know if we would. Because love doesn't always silence hate. Looking back now, I wish I'd done more in that moment, stood up at that table and told everyone exactly what I thought of them. But I didn't. I drove us home in silence, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my mind spinning. That night, lying awake next to her, I made a decision. I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let their lies destroy the best thing that had ever happened to me. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about family gossip anymore. It was a battle. One I had to find a way to win, for her, for us, for the life we were building together. I'll never forget the day it all came crashing down. It was my father's birthday, and my mom wanted to make it special. She invited everyone, siblings, cousins, family friends. The house was full, the way it always was when Dad was around. He had that kind of presence that pulled people together. Emily spent the entire morning in the kitchen, baking his favorite cake from scratch, the lemon one he loved. She even hand-whipped the frosting because she said it tasted more like love that way. She wanted, more than anything, for them to see who she really was. When we got there, she walked straight to the kitchen, balancing the cake carefully. "Happy birthday, Mr. Carter," she said with that warm smile that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. My mom smiled back, but there was hesitation in her eyes, like she didn't know whether to trust that kindness. Then it happened. As Emily placed the cake on the counter, one of my aunts, the one who always found a way to stir the pot, muttered just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, trying a little too hard, "Don't you think? Wonder what she's after this time." I froze. Emily's shoulders stiffened. She didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. She just walked out of the kitchen and out the front door. By the time I caught up with her, she was sitting in the car, her hands gripping her lap, her eyes red with tears. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly, her voice breaking in a way that gutted me. "I love you, but I can't keep proving myself to people who have already decided who I am. I can't walk into a room and feel like I'm on trial every time." I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that we didn't need their approval, but the truth was, it mattered to her. And if it mattered to her, it mattered to me. Inside the house, laughter and conversation continued like nothing had happened. No one came out to check on her. No one asked why she left. They didn't care. Driving home that night, I kept glancing at her, hoping she'd look at me, but she just stared out the window. The silence between us was heavier than it had ever been. When we got home, she went straight to bed without saying a word. I sat in the living room for hours, replaying everything in my head, every whisper, every joke, every moment where I'd chosen silence instead of defending her. That was the night something in me snapped. I realized that staying quiet was just making it worse. That by letting it slide, I was giving them permission to keep hurting her. And I hated myself for it. The next morning, Emily tried to act like nothing had happened. She smiled as she made coffee, kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. But I could see it, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine, the way her hands trembled when she reached for her mug. She was slipping away from me. And I couldn't let that happen. I started pulling back from family gatherings. At first, they noticed. My mom called, my sister texted, asking why we weren't coming around. I gave vague excuses, work, plans, exhaustion, but the truth was, I couldn't stomach the thought of sitting there while they chipped away at her spirit. Of course, that only made things worse. The rumors grew. Now it wasn't just that Emily was a gold digger, now she was controlling me, isolating me from my family. One night, my brother showed up unannounced. He stood on my porch, his voice dripping with anger, accusing Emily of manipulating me, of trying to cut me off from my roots. Emily stayed inside, sitting silently on the couch, tears streaming down her face as his voice boomed through the house. I told him to leave. When he didn't, I made him. And that was the final straw. After he left, I walked back inside and found Emily still sitting there, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. She looked up at me, her eyes empty, and whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." I dropped to my knees in front of her, took her hands, and said, "No. They're wrong. They don't get to decide who belongs in my life. You are my life, Emily. And I'm done letting them hurt you." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. I would find a way to put an end to this, to shut the lies down, to make them see the truth. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to lose her. Not to gossip. Not to their hate. Not to anyone. Losing my father felt like losing the ground beneath my feet. One moment he was there, strong and full of life, and the next, a phone call in the middle of the night telling me he'd had a heart attack. I don't remember much about the days that followed. Just flashes, the drive to my mom's house, the way she clung to me like a child, the endless stream of people stopping by with casseroles and pity in their eyes. Emily was my rock through all of it. She handled the phone calls I couldn't, cooked meals when I forgot to eat, and sat with me in silence when there were no words left to say. She never once made it about her, never complained, even though I could see the exhaustion in her face. But if I thought my father's death would bring the family together, I was wrong. At the funeral, the whispers started again, louder this time, sharper, like people weren't even trying to hide their contempt anymore. I overheard one of my cousins say, "Well, she's about to hit the jackpot now," and another whisper, "Watch, she'll have him sell the house within a year." Emily heard it, too. I saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way she lowered her head like a child being scolded for something she didn't do. But she stayed silent, just like always, because that's who she is, too gracious to fight back, even when she's being cut to pieces. Then came the will. I didn't know what to expect. My father and I were close, but I'd never thought about what he'd leave behind or how he'd divide things. I assumed it would be simple, everything split equally between me, my siblings, and Mom. But when we sat in that cold, cramped office, the air thick with tension, and the lawyer began to read, my stomach dropped. My father had left everything to me. The house, the savings, even the shares in his company, all of it. I didn't understand. None of us did. My siblings' faces twisted with anger, confusion, betrayal. And before the lawyer even finished, the accusation started. "This is her doing," my sister hissed, pointing at Emily. "She manipulated him. She's been playing this game for years. She's been waiting for this," my brother added, his voice rising. "Dad didn't even like her. She must have tricked him, pressured him somehow. There's no other explanation." Emily sat frozen, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. She didn't look at them, didn't look at me. She just stared at the floor, her face pale and empty. I wanted to defend her, God, I wanted to scream, but the room was chaos. Voices overlapping, anger spilling over like a dam had finally broken. By the time we walked out of that office, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were worse. The phone calls came non-stop, threats, demands, accusations. My brother showed up at my house shouting that Emily had poisoned our father against the rest of us. Neighbors heard. Friends heard. And Emily, she started disappearing into herself. She stopped coming out of the bedroom, stopped answering calls from the few people who still treated her kindly. I'd find her sitting on the floor, staring at old photos of my dad, whispering, "I swear I never asked for any of this. I swear." It killed me. I tried to explain to my family that the will was my father's choice, that none of this had been orchestrated, but they wouldn't hear it. They didn't want the truth, they wanted someone to blame. And blaming the gold digger was easier than facing the reality that maybe, just maybe, my father trusted me more than he trusted them. I started avoiding everyone. I didn't answer calls, didn't go to family gatherings, didn't even open the blinds some days because I couldn't stand the feeling of being watched and judged. But deep down, I knew hiding wasn't the answer. The damage was done, and the only way forward was through. Emily deserved to have her name cleared. She deserved to live without this shadow hanging over her, without being treated like some thief who had stolen her way into my father's fortune. So when the letter came, the official notice that my siblings were contesting the will, dragging us into court, I didn't panic. For the first time in months, I felt something else, determination. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. And this time, I wasn't going to let Emily stand alone. The day of the hearing, the air felt heavy, like a storm that refused to break. Emily barely said a word that morning. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at nothing. Her eyes were red and tired, the kind of tired that no amount of sleep could fix. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that this nightmare would end soon, but I didn't trust my voice to hold steady. So instead, I just placed my hand over hers and said, "Whatever happens today, we face it together." She nodded, but didn't look at me. Walking into that courtroom felt surreal. My siblings were already there, sitting in a row with their attorney, a man in a sharp suit and a smug grin, like he'd already won. The looks they gave us as we entered were colder than ice. If hate could burn, we'd have been ashes right there on the floor. Emily sat beside me, small and quiet, her hands folded in her lap. I could feel her shaking, and I hated that there was nothing I could do to make it stop. Then our lawyer stood up. Calm, collected, with a stack of folders under his arm and a confidence that I envied. The opposing lawyer went first, spewing the same lies we'd been hearing for months. That Emily had manipulated my father. That she'd isolated him from the rest of the family. That she had somehow coerced him into leaving everything to me, knowing she'd benefit from it. They painted her as a schemer, a predator, someone who saw an opportunity and took it. Each word felt like a knife. When it was our turn, our lawyer didn't raise his voice. He didn't match their anger. Instead, he laid out the facts, one by one, like carefully placed bricks. He showed medical records proving my father had been of sound mind until the very end. Emails between my father and his financial advisor confirming that the decision had been his alone. Witness statements from friends and neighbors who had seen firsthand the bond my father and I shared, and how much he respected Emily. Then, the lawyer reached into his folder and pulled out an envelope. It was old, yellowed around the edges, but sealed with my father's handwriting on the front. He looked up at the judge and said, "Your Honor, this is a letter from Mr. Carter, addressed to his family, to be read in the event of a dispute. With the court's permission." The judge nodded. The lawyer opened the letter and began to read. "To my family, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and I know there are questions. Maybe even anger. But I want you to understand something. I left everything to my son not because anyone else is less loved, but because I trust him. He's always been the one who stood by me, the one I knew would do right by all of you, even when you didn't deserve it. As for Emily, she is the best thing that ever happened to him. She's been nothing but kind, nothing but patient, even when you made it hard for her. She loves him in a way that money can't buy, and if you can't see that, that's your loss. She's family. Treat her as such. The courtroom went silent. I looked over at my siblings. For the first time in months, they didn't look angry. They just looked stunned. My sister had tears in her eyes. My brother stared at the floor, his jaw clenched, but there was no fight left in him. Beside me, Emily finally exhaled, a shaky, quiet sound that broke something inside me. She reached for my hand under the table, her fingers trembling as they laced with mine. The judge reviewed the documents, asked a few questions, and then delivered the verdict: the will was valid. My father's wishes would stand. There was no evidence of coercion, no manipulation, nothing but the truth that we'd known all along. When the gavel came down, I felt the weight I'd been carrying for months finally begin to lift. Walking out of that courtroom, the hallway felt different. Lighter. My siblings didn't say much, just nods and quiet goodbyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And Emily, for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. Not the polite, forced smile she'd worn to keep up appearances. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen since before the whispers began. In that moment, I realized something important: we hadn't just defended a will. We had defended our life, our love, and the truth that had been twisted by months of lies. And finally, the truth had spoken louder than the whispers. When the lawyer finished reading the will, the room went quiet, like someone had sucked the air out of it. My wife sat there, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. For months, she'd endured their stares, their whispered comments, their cruel little jokes. Now, every single person in that room knew the truth: my father hadn't left her money out of pity or manipulation. He'd done it because he trusted her. Because she had been the one who stayed, who cared, who made his final days easier. It took a few minutes before anyone could even speak. My sister, the one who had called her a gold digger to her face during Christmas dinner, was the first to break the silence. I didn't know," she said, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. She wasn't looking at my wife, but at the floor, like maybe if she didn't make eye contact, it would hurt less. My wife didn't say a word. She just sat there, breathing slow, holding herself together. One by one, they started coming up to her. My brother, who had been the loudest voice against her, muttered something about being sorry. My uncle, who had warned me she was after the family name, shook his head and said he'd been wrong. Even my cousin, the one who'd started the rumor in the first place, couldn't look her in the eye as she stammered out an apology. And the whole time, she just listened. No tears, no angry outburst, no triumphant "I told you so." She simply nodded, quiet and composed, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. When my sister finally said, "We treated you horribly," my wife just smiled, not a happy smile, more like a sad acknowledgement, and said, "I know. But it's over now." The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that while I had been furious at everyone, she had just endured. She had chosen not to fight, not to defend herself, not because she didn't care, but because she believed the truth would come out eventually. And when it did, she didn't need to gloat. She had her dignity intact, something none of them could take from her. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I found her sitting quietly in the garden, the same spot where she used to sit with my father when his strength was failing. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. She turned to me, and there was a softness in her eyes that nearly broke me. "I didn't marry you for any of this," she said quietly. "I married you because you were the only person who ever made me feel like I was home." I took her hand and held it, and for the first time in months, I felt like we could finally breathe again. The storm had passed. The rumors, the judgment, the constant second-guessing, it was all behind us. The next few weeks were strange. Family members kept calling, some trying to make small talk, others apologizing again, as if they thought saying it enough times might erase what they'd done. My wife was gracious with every single one of them. She forgave them, or at least she acted like she did, because that's just who she is. But I could tell it had changed something in her. There was a distance now, a carefulness in the way she interacted with them, like she'd built a quiet wall to protect herself. I couldn't blame her. Neither of us would ever forget how quickly people we loved had turned against her, how eager they'd been to believe the worst. But as much as those months had hurt, they'd also revealed something beautiful, the strength of the woman I married. She didn't need their approval or validation. She had always known her worth. And now, finally, they knew it too. Looking back, I think that moment, sitting in the garden with her hand in mine, was when I truly understood what my father had seen in her. She wasn't just a woman who had loved me. She was the one who had loved us, who had taken care of my father not because of his money or his name, but because she had a heart big enough to love him when everyone else had already given up. And no rumor, no whispered insult, no cruel assumption could ever change that. Looking back, I see now how blind I was to the weight my wife carried on her shoulders. At the time, I thought I understood, but I didn't, not really. I didn't understand how every whisper, every sideways glance, every fake smile chipped away at her. She never asked for pity. She never lashed out. She just kept her head high and loved me through it all, even when the people closest to me treated her like she didn't belong. After the lawyer revealed my father's will, and everyone's masks fell away, something in me changed. I'd always been proud of my family, proud of where I came from. But now, I saw the cracks, the jealousy, the entitlement, the quiet cruelty they'd dressed up as concern. For years, they'd convinced themselves that Emily was with me for money, that she didn't love me, that she was taking something from them. And when they realized the truth, that my father had seen her for who she truly was, long before they ever did, they were left with nothing but their shame. The weeks after the reading were quiet. Too quiet, at first. No calls. No texts. Just silence, as if everyone had gone into hiding. I thought Emily would feel vindicated, maybe even a little smug, but that wasn't her way. She didn't want their apologies or their approval. She just wanted peace. And maybe that's when I finally understood the strength she carried, loving me, even when the people I loved made her feel unwelcome. It took time, but eventually, the apologies came. Some were whispered, tentative, "I'm sorry, we were wrong." Others were longer, full of guilt, trying to make up for years of assumptions and quiet cruelty. And Emily, in her calm, graceful way, accepted every one of them. Not because she needed to, but because holding on to anger wasn't who she was. What I know now is this: love reveals people. It shows you who they are in ways you can't unsee. My wife never needed my father's money, never needed his validation. But he saw her for what she truly was, a woman who loved his son enough to stand by him, even when the world told her she didn't belong. Sometimes, I think about my father and wonder if he knew what his decision would do, not just the inheritance, but the way it stripped everything bare and forced us all to see the truth. Maybe he did. Maybe that was his final gift to us. These days, I don't care what people think. Our home is quiet, filled with laughter and a kind of love you can't fake. Emily gardens in the mornings, humming to herself, and I watch her sometimes, feeling that same surge of gratitude I felt the first time she smiled at me in that tiny coffee shop years ago. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't proven by what people say or by what you can give. It's proven in the quiet moments, in the way someone chooses to stay, even when the world gives them a reason to walk away. Emily stayed. She fought for us. And now, when I look at her, I don't just see my wife. I see the person who taught me what loyalty really means. I used to think my father's legacy was the business, the house, the investments. But I see now that his real legacy was the way he taught me to recognize the people who truly matter, and to never take them for granted. So, when people whisper now, when they make their little comments about how lucky Emily is, I just smile. Because they'll never understand that I'm the lucky one.